Now, in this segment, I want to share with you a very important principle. This idea is especially pertinent to you as a woman or even a man that was part of this process. Who you were when this decision was made is an important part of you kind of integrating your whole story, okay? You were possibly a daughter who did not want to bring shame to her family. I can't tell you how many women told me, I never told my parents. I never will. I didn't want to bring shame to my family, especially if you're brought up in a very religious home. You just didn't want to do that. Okay, possibly you were a believer in Christ, possibly you weren't. But there was a much younger version of you that made this decision. Many of the women I deal with are 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70 years old before they open this door and say, here it is. Okay, you don't want to wait that long. You actually want to get the grace after abortion and get started right now. Right now is your time of healing. Okay, you don't have to carry this for another decade. But that person, that younger version of you, you had, maybe limited financial resources. Maybe it was even hard to take care of yourself. I've had many ladies who were like living in an apartment or living still at home and or in college, or they were in some situation where financially they did not feel like they could take care of a child. Okay, and they may or not even known who the father was. There's situations where they're being immoral and they don't even know. Okay, the father may or may not have been ready or been a person that you would want to have a child with. And I'm talking, usually this is a teenage young woman, okay, who feels very afraid, who feels very scared, very overwhelmed, very trapped by the situation. And I'm saying this because I want us to have empathy. I want you to see the younger version of you are these ladies. And ladies, let me just say this right now. If you've never had an abortion, get this product and start a group and just minister. You don't have to have had an abortion to love people, okay? And this younger version of you, maybe you were dealing with other emotional issues, or maybe you had addiction issues to alcohol or drugs or even sexuality. Now, to say that you were terrified or overwhelmed or confused would be an understatement. When women kind of unwind the story with me, they describe a young woman who didn't know what to do, a very scared, frightened woman who every option was bad. Every option to them was bad. And I know some of you religious people used to want to say, yeah, you choose life. Like, yeah, it's already done. That's not the response they need to hear. I'm saying this so that you can have compassion on your younger self. And if you are in a place where you look at people who have this choice, and maybe it wasn't the best choice, but it doesn't matter. Like when we sin, it doesn't matter what it is, okay? We are loved and forgiven. And that is what we as believers need to emanate. And I didn't even bring in all the family dynamic, your family, his family, the peers that you had at the time, and others that may have been in your life to influence this decision. I remember one lady was telling me a story, and she told her girlfriend, she goes, oh gosh, I had an abortion just a couple months ago, just walked down to the clinic. And then she tells how horrific her experience was after that, and how suicidal she became, and how depressed she became for years. I've met women who were driven to the doctor's office, not even knowing they were scheduled to have an abortion, by their parents. Okay, that's who you were, how you made the decision at that time. Life is full of decisions. In many ways, these decisions, you're 16 to 25 maybe. How much information did you really, really have about this? obviously you even lacked decision about sexuality, relationships, and intimacy. You lacked a lot of information on this decision you were going to make. Many of the ladies I met who've had abortions had no plans whatsoever to get pregnant. And honestly, some of them had no plans not to get pregnant because they didn't even think about the consequences because they weren't really even developed to think about the future. You gotta understand, some of this happens at 12, 13, 14 years old. Okay, and maybe you were in a situation with someone you just met, or you were in a relationship for a while. Maybe you were in a compromising situation with alcohol or drugs, or just bad friends. I've known ladies who've been raped or sexually abused who find themselves pregnant, and they're in a situation that really is very complicated and difficult for them. And this is where I think, church people, we get a bad rap because we don't really consider how this person processed and this person, who they were at the time. And Finding Grace After Abortion in the workbook, here's some questions that you'll answer. What was my general belief about pregnancy and sex? Like, you do some of the work about like where you were in time. What were my circumstances prior to being sexual with this person or other people in my life? You dig into some of the stuff so that you can see who you were. There was this person you just met, short-term relationship, long-term relationship. What were the belief differences, okay, that he and you ended up having? From your perspective, what emotions led you into that relationship? And what did you learn? There's all kinds of stuff that when you dig into how you got there, who you were, then you're going to be able to do this. Now, I want to talk about the behaviors that you probably did after you changed, but I want to talk about the pain. When you experience the trauma of an abortion, and it is traumatic, no matter what the culture says. I've never met a woman that wasn't traumatic. Now, I've met women who denied it was traumatic, okay? But then they end up crying and doing all the work, and it's like, wow, okay? There's undoubtedly going to be pain. People feel pain, and they react to pain very differently, even in circumstances that might seem like, oh, I just got over it. No, and then they end up making a lot of bad choices. Here are some key areas that you'll look at as you go through the process. The reputational damage that you might have had or protected, the spiritual damage that was caused with your relationship with God, and maybe your relationship with the church, because oftentimes a woman and a man, they'll pull away from serving the Lord. The self-esteem that you suffered, how you believed about your body, how you believed about your beauty from that point forward, your relationships with your friends, your relationship with money. Some ladies just end up going into debt and spending, trying to make themselves feel better, how they feel about sexuality in general, how they act, and their emotions. There's so much different pain. But in the next segment, I'm going to give you some practical tools to start healing. And I want you, whether you've ever gone through this or not, to take some notes. Because if you're in that prayer ministry, if you're in that situation where women will come across your path, you've already met so many that need grace after abortion.
For more content and resources to help in your healing journey with Christ, make sure to follow Dr. Doug Weiss on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to share full episodes of this show with friends and family, subscribe to Healing Time Ministries on YouTube, and feel free to leave us a comment on any of Dr. Doug's social media platforms. Our team would love to hear your feedback and learn how Healing Time is impacting your life, your church, and your ministry.